Sean, can you count down from 10?
Sure. Yeah. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, and welcome to the Winchester League of Women Voters Forum for the two candidates vying to be the Democratic Party's nominee for state representative for the 31st Middlesex District. According to the Massachusetts Constitution, our state representatives are charged with representing the best interest of the citizens of their district, Winchester and Stoneham in this case, as they draft and pass state legislation. I am Ann Bailey Berman. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters and will be the interviewer for today's forum. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots, nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Now let's turn to the forum and the format for which has been previously agreed. First, I will present brief biographies of each candidate. The biographies have been previously approved by the individual candidate. Next, each candidate will present a short opening statement of 2 minutes on why they are running. The order of the opening statement was predetermined, scientifically may I add, by a toss of a coin. Then a series of questions submitted by the public will be asked, and the candidates will have 1 minute to respond and 30 seconds for rebuttal. I may also ask some follow-up questions. Regarding these questions, the League has been asked to announce that one of our members who reviewed the questions submitted by the public is a donator to and a supporter of Jason Lewis. Finally, each candidate will present a 1 minute closing statement on why they want your vote. Let's begin. John F. DePinto was elected to the Stoneham Board of Selectmen 8 years ago. He has been a certified public accountant for more than 35 years. John decided to run as a state representative because he sees the need for a dynamic leader who will help families, households, and business owners. John is an enthusiastic graduate of Boston College and is active at the state and national levels of the Sons of Liberty in America and the Stoneham Chamber of Commerce. John is a lifelong resident of Stoneham. Jason M. Lewis was elected as state representative for the 31st Middlesex District in 2008. He serves as the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Public Health and also sits on a number of other committees, including community development and small businesses. He attended Harvard College and Harvard Business School. Jason lives in Winchester. So, Jason, will you begin? Why are you running for this office?
Thank you, Ann, and I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate and for all the work that you do to encourage civic engagement. Despite the difficult economy and the budget challenges that we've faced in the past few years, I'm proud of the results that we have achieved. I have worked closely with our community leaders and residents to address a wide range of community concerns, including local economic development, school funding and facilities, flood mitigation, neighborhood traffic and safety, and public transportation. Some of our most significant accomplishments over the last few years include, first, gaining state support for critical school building projects, including the Stoneham Middle School, Vincent Owen Elementary School, and Winchester High School. Second, convincing the MBTA to move forward with accessibility improvements at the Wedgmere station and to rebuild the Winchester Center station. Third, securing a preliminary commitment of over $5 million in state and federal funding for the Tri-Community Greenway, which promises significant economic development and recreational benefits for Stoneham and Winchester. And fourth, rallying community support to save the Stone Zoo and the Hall Memorial Swimming Pool, both of which were in danger of closing due to budget cuts. In the state legislature, I've drawn on my skills from a successful business career to bring more efficiency, accountability, and transparency to our state government. My efforts have helped pass sweeping reforms, including pensions, transportation, municipal health insurance, ethics, and probation. These reforms, along with sound fiscal management, have led to the state's highest credit rating in its history and a rainy day fund balance that now exceeds $1 billion. The state's unemployment rate has fallen steadily to 6%, well below the national average, which remains above 8%. I ask for your support to continue the important work we have underway in our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. John, why are you running for office?
First, I would also like to thank the Winchester League of Women Voters for holding this event tonight. I'd like to just make one minor change in my biography. You mentioned earlier, it's the Sons of Italy that I belong to nationally and statewide. But I'd like to make that little minor change. We can all agree, I believe, that we're in tough economic times. Public schools, businesses, and families are hurting. I have consistently used my knowledge as a certified public accountant to solve complex budgetary issues and have been fiscally responsible with taxpayers' dollars. Stoneham and Winchester need a tough and persistent leader on Beacon Hill. As your representative, I will hit the ground running because of my experience as a CPA, a selectman, and problem solver. But most importantly, because of my passion for the people and my ability to think outside the box and get things done.
Thank you. Now we will start with the question and answer part of the interview. Candidates have not seen the questions in advance. These questions have been solicited from the public, and we will start in alphabetical order and then rotate for subsequent questions. Responses will be 1 minute each, with rebuttals being 30 seconds. And I may follow up, just for clarification purposes. So we start, first of all, with you, John.
Yes.
What would your 3 highest priorities be during your term as a state representative?
State funding for the district, Chapter 70 specifically, for education for the children, and also for road improvements and infrastructure would be very, very important to get the dollars necessary to fix the things that have to be fixed. I would use my budgetary skills and finally to shrink the size of the state government so more money could come down to the towns. The state is too large, more money should be coming down, should be spending less at the state. And that's where my experience as a certified public accountant for over 35 years would come in, to shrink the size of state government and get more money for the towns. We are underfunded, we need more money, especially Chapter 70. Chapter 70, it's been 18 years since Chapter 70, almost 20 years since Chapter 70 was formed. It's old, it's been tweaked, but it hasn't been changed. You don't keep your car that long, so why should we have a formula for Chapter 70 that old?
Jason, what would your priorities be going forward?
Top 3 priorities for me would continue to be 3 areas that I've spent a lot of time working on in the almost 4 years now that I've been in office. First is focusing on local economic development opportunities in Stoneham and Winchester. These are projects that contribute to our quality of life and strengthen and enhance our communities. Second is the area of education funding and local aid. I believe that we should have an education funding system which provides adequate and fair, sustainable funding for all of our public schools. We've made some progress on this issue, and I've been a leader working on this issue in the state legislature. In fact, I'm the lead sponsor of legislation to update the Chapter 70 formula. And then third priority is an area I've spent a lot of time working on, which is healthcare costs for our families and small businesses and local government. We've made significant progress in this area. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk more about that, but that's an area that will continue to get my attention.
John, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, well, funding in the district is actually down the last 4 years, and that's why I think it's important to shrink the size of state government, get more funding, get more Chapter 70 money. We have to educate our children. It's a worldwide economy now. Things are changing, and they have to be kept current.
Jason?
Respectfully, that's actually incorrect. The total local aid between our unrestricted aid and our school funding that is going to our district now is actually above where it was before I came into office, and that's also in the face of the most severe recession that we have faced in anyone's memory, which has decimated state tax revenues. But we've made it a priority at the state level to continue to invest in our communities, notwithstanding these fiscal difficulties, and we've continued to invest in education funding and local aid to the best of our ability.
Both of you have talked about Chapter 70 funding. The second question is directed right at that. The state provides aid to local education through Chapter 70 funding. Aid is based on, this is for the audience, aid is based on a formula that estimates the cost of educating each child versus available community resource, so-called foundation funding. Educators and others believe that the formula is out of date and not reflective of actual costs borne by communities. Two parts to this question. How would you revise the formula, if at all? And two, if so, how would you pay for what is likely to be increased costs to the Commonwealth? Jason, we start with you.
This is, as I mentioned earlier, this has been one of the top issues that I've been working on in office. It is a critical issue for all of our communities. Chapter 70, which is the money that goes to our public schools, is the largest single area within the state budget, second only to Mass Health, which is our Medicaid program. So it's a very important part of state spending, and overall contributes about over 40% of the total money that's spent on public schools in the state. I am the lead sponsor of legislation to update the Chapter 70 formula. As John mentioned earlier, it was put in place in 1993 when we last went through a major education reform period, and it worked quite well through most of the 1990s, but since then it hasn't kept up with things like health insurance costs, technology costs, the cost to educate our special needs children. And so the legislation I filed would go back and reassess the formula, all of the underlying assumptions, and update that for the current period and the current challenges our schools face.
John, what would you do?
Chapter 70, as I mentioned earlier, it has to be changed dramatically. You just can't keep tweaking it the way we're tweaking it. You know, I mentioned earlier, if you have an 18-year-old car, you just don't change the oil. At the minimum, you got to do a new engine, maybe a new car. And the problem is times change, and because of the formula, some of the towns aren't keeping up with the Chapter 70 funding that they should be getting. And in the district, that's what's happening right now. Stoneham in particular is about 10% behind what the state average is in Chapter 70 funding. So things have to be changed, and I would fund it by shrinking the size of state government, use my CPA skills. Thank you.
Jason? Follow-up?
John's right that Stoneham has faced a particular challenge given the dynamics of the community. Senator Clark, who also represents Stoneham along with myself, we teamed up in this particular budget cycle to push an initiative which was successful in moving communities like Stoneham closer to their target aid level, and that was responsible for $156,000 in additional Chapter 70 aid this year for Stoneham, over and above what the governor put in his budget. So that's progress. Winchester has been receiving considerably more money because of enrollment growth in the Winchester schools, which is a key factor in the formula.
John?
Yes, the state budget this year, I believe, is $33 billion, and Stoneham got an additional $150,000. That's a number that doesn't work. We need more money. Like I said, we have to just take Chapter 70 and just completely change it and get the money by shrinking state government.
This next question relates to solid waste disposal and recycling. Both Stoneham and Winchester struggle with managing the cost for solid waste disposal and recycling. A revised bottle bill that would make the 5-cent deposit apply to all plastic drink bottles has been under consideration by the state legislature for some time. Do you support the updated bottle bill? And if so, what would you do to get the House of Representatives to pass it? That is
Me?
John.
Yes. No, I don't support an updated bottle bill. I don't support any new taxes that would take businesses away from the Commonwealth. The 31st Middlesex District, it's not a border town, but it's close enough that any additional taxes, the business is just going to go to New Hampshire. you help with recycling by education. Actually, I led a program in Stoneham to change recycling. We're actually going to do a payment system with coupons, but unfortunately the commodities market of the recycling crashed, and there was no more market for it. The best way to do it is through education. Educate the people how much more they pay in trash every year because they don't recycle. This list, our selectmen's meeting tomorrow night, we're handing out the new list of all the recyclables. And we're going to send them out to all the residents in Stoneham so that they know what's recyclable and ask them to recycle, because we can knock the trash costs down and help the environment.
Jason?
The bottle bill is not a tax, it's a deposit. And when you return your container, you get your deposit back. So it doesn't, most people would not consider that a tax. The bottle bill was enacted originally, I believe, in 1980, and it's by far the state's most successful recycling and sustainability program. About 80% of the containers that are covered by the deposit system are in fact recycled. And for those that are not covered, like juice bottles, iced tea, water bottles that didn't even exist back at that time, only 20% of those are recycled, so there's a very big difference. I do support updating the bottle bill to include those containers. To me, it's a common sense legislation. I've co-sponsored it ever since I was in the legislature and worked hard to see it passed. I think it'll help our recycling industry and our recyclers. There are provisions in the legislation to help small retailers so that they don't have to stock all of those bottles. I think that makes sense. And to me, it's just one part of our strategy to increase recycling and reduce solid waste. It's not a silver bullet, but it would certainly make a difference.
John?
Yes, it's a tax. A tax is a tax. You can call it any way you want. It is a tax. And one thing the Commonwealth is not doing is making it easy for people to return the bottles. We had a recycling center close on Montville Ave. They're not paying the businesses out of the nickel enough money to hire people to collect the bottles. You have to help your businesses if you want bottles returned. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. So people will then recycle through their community.
Jason?
The legislation that I have co-sponsored actually does increase the fee that's paid to the recycling centers, many of which are struggling to stay in business, and that would actually help them to recycle even more, and it would increase jobs in that sector of our economy. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also a sponsor of a bill that I filed to help increase recycling at the municipal level. And I think that would be a complement to updating the bottle bill. They would both work together to increase recycling rates and save a lot of money for our cities and towns that have to pay to dispose of all the solid waste.
The next question relates to the economy. Unemployment in Massachusetts continues to be too high, although not as high as in other states. Please share your views on what practical measures the Massachusetts legislature can do to pass or to act to reduce unemployment further. I'll start with Jason.
This has been a major focus of the state legislature and the governor ever since I've been in office for 4 years. I think we've had a lot of success in helping to put in place policies that have contributed to an unemployment rate coming down. As you mentioned, Ann, it's now down around 6%, which is still higher than where we would like it to be, but it is we are significantly better off than pretty much anywhere else in the country. We've seen job growth in healthcare, education, in clean energy, and the high-tech sectors, which is really what drives a lot of our state economy. The state legislature has acted in a wide variety of ways to contribute to that. First and foremost is good fiscal management. We've passed on-time balanced budgets every year, very different from what's been happening in Washington, so that creates a certainty in our business community. We've passed very important reforms like our pension system, our transportation bureaucracy, municipal health care, so that's all contributed to this environment. And we've also passed legislation that promotes innovation and R&D investment in the state.
John, what would you recommend?
Well, first I would do is I would reduce taxes where possible. For instance, the sales tax. There was a bill up on the Hill to reduce the sales tax from 6.25%, which it is now, to 5%. It went to study. When a bill goes to study up on the Beacon Hill, it's virtually dead. So now that business is still going to New Hampshire. It's the Employment Opportunity Act every time we raise a tax or don't lower a tax. There was also a bill to have a 2-day sales tax holiday. We currently have a 1-day sales tax holiday. I have clients that are part of the sales tax holiday. Not only does the businessman do well, but they have to put on more help that day, which means the employees are getting overtime and they're earning more money that they can put back into the economy and put more people to work. We also had a bill to help the municipalities that didn't pass, do away with the gasoline tax for the municipalities. That would help too, because now the municipalities would have more money and they may be able to put on more teachers, fire, and policemen and DPW workers.
Jason?
Sounds very appealing to tell the voters that you want to both cut taxes and you want to increase funding for education and local aid. Just doesn't add up. My opponent is a CPA and I'm sure very good at what he does, but the numbers don't add up. If we want to come in and cut the sales tax or income tax or the other sources of revenue the state depends on, I guess we could pursue that course, but I can assure you then we're not going to be able to put more money into local aid, into our schools, into fire and police, into our roads and bridges, into our parks and so on. You just can't do both.
John, what do you say?
That's not true. By decreasing taxes, you have more employment, you have more people working, you have more people making more money, going out and buying automobiles, which they would pay a sales tax on. So your sales tax revenues keep coming in. You'll be paying more income tax, and hopefully more money going to the Commonwealth, so the income tax rate goes down. The more people that work, the more money that goes in the pocket of the residents of the state and gets spent. The revenues will not reduce. You'll have the revenues. You'll be able to educate your children and do all the services that the people in our district deserve.
John, let's continue with you. What's your view on, or position on voter IDs?
Well, we actually had this question in the paper. I'm actually a great-grandson and grandson of Italian immigrants. And I remember my grandfather telling me, because when they came from Italy, they couldn't vote. Italy did not become a republic until 1946. And he told me how important it was to vote. And because of that, I believe in voter ID, because he told me the integrity of the ballot and the importance of voting. Every ballot counts, he says, and that's why you go out there and you vote. And without voter ID, I mean, we have IDs for everything today. The only thing I would say is the voter ID has to be accessible and it has to be free. Everybody should be able to get one easily and they shouldn't have to pay for it. This way, everybody that's entitled to vote, as a citizen of the United States, is entitled to vote, can vote. But we have to keep the integrity of that vote there. It's something I learned from like I said, from my grandparents, my grandfather and my great-grandfather coming from Italy, because they couldn't vote. And it's been in the back of my mind my whole life.
Jason?
Something John and I have in common is both that we come from a family of immigrants, and in fact, I was fortunate enough to come to the United States with my family to immigrate here when I was a child. And I remember when I was 18 and I took the Pledge of Allegiance and the oath to become a citizen, and how meaningful that was to me and to my sisters and my parents. And so I understand and feel very deeply how important it is, the right to vote, to express ourselves. It's so fundamental to our freedom. And that's exactly why I believe that this question of voter ID is really the completely wrong question. What we should be asking ourselves is, how do we strengthen our elections? How do we get more people to vote? It saddens me that in some of our elections, the participation rate can be as low as 10 or 15 or 20%. We should be putting all our energy and effort into is, how do we get those rates of participation up so that young people are voting in higher rates, seniors are all voting, busy working families are finding time to get to the polls. And there's ways to do that are proven, that are effective. We can have early voting periods. We can have pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. We can allow people to download registration forms. That's what we should be focusing on. The issue of requiring people to show ID at the polls is searching for a problem that doesn't even exist. There's virtually no evidence of somebody going in and posing as somebody else at a polling place in Massachusetts. So let's focus on the real problem and try to solve that.
John?
Well, I asked, after I answered the question, I asked a friend of mine, about voter ID, and what he said was pretty sad. He said, no, I believe that dead people should be allowed to vote. And that's a pretty sad statement. The integrity of the vote is so important in this country. It's the one thing that separates us from a lot of the countries in this world that can't vote. And we have to keep that vote, the integrity of that vote, important. Well, again, we have to get it accessible and we have to make it free. Everybody should easily be able to obtain an ID. My 80-year-old mother doesn't drive, but she has an ID. because she is able to get to the registry to get her ID, because around in Massachusetts, it is accessible.
Let's move on.
Do I get a chance to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Jason.
Ann. I'm glad that John's mother has that ID and it wouldn't be an issue for her, but unfortunately there's more than 10% of people in Massachusetts, many of them seniors or low income, who don't have an ID. And it's not so simple for them to just go and get one. Some of them are disabled, they're working 3 jobs, and those are people who may be disenfranchised if this were to become law. So why would we disenfranchise 10% of our voters when in fact we should be doing just the opposite, encouraging more people to participate? And again, that's in the face of no evidence of people committing fraud at the polls, or virtually none.
Let's move on to another subject. Jason, you will start here. In the last legislative session, there was an unsuccessful attempt to cut all state funding for family planning services. If the issue comes up again, what is your position on state funding for women's health, family planning, and contraceptive providers such as Planned Parenthood? Jason?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is referring to in terms of a particular vote, but I can tell you in general, state funding for healthcare and family planning services is critically important. There are many women, particularly lower income women, who need access to screenings, cancer screenings, reproductive health services, and they should be able to get those services. We have very good programs in the state, and in many ways our healthcare system and our access to basic and preventative care for all of our citizens is exceptional and is better than most other places in the country, and that's something we should be proud of, and we should seek to continue to support that and improve our healthcare system.
John?
Yes, before I answer the question, I hope Maz, when she watches this, is not disappointed that I mentioned her age. I'm sorry, Mom. I think I also agree that we should fund our health care for people who can't afford it. Everybody should be able to get health care. I mean, that's a prerequisite. We have a wonderful hospital there, the Winchester Hospital. Actually, my dad spent the last days of his life there, and the quality and the caring of the doctors and nurses and administrators there is wonderful. And people should have access to hospitals like the Winchester Hospital.
Jason?
I certainly agree about the quality and accessibility of Winchester Hospital. I've had the pleasure of working closely with the nurses there and the doctors and the administration. They do a great job providing care to everyone in the community, and are a good example of the kinds of community hospitals that we want to support for both family planning services and other healthcare services.
John?
Yes, I just
Very
again,
great.
Winchester.
Let's move on to transportation. The MBTA seems to be in perpetual fiscal crisis. How would you propose solving this problem? John, we'll start with you.
Well, again, budgetary issues. This year, as a matter of fact, we had issues. We have in Stoneham, there's only one bus route, and it was talk about doing away with that bus route to help the budget. And yet the town would still get assessed their $400,000 assessment without even having a bus route. But that's unacceptable. You have to shrink the size of any budget by starting basically with the waste. And no matter what budget it is, where it is, not just government, even in business. I see this in business too. You got to start with the waste. And the only way the MBTA is going to, it's an old joke, get out of the hole, which it started in the hole basically because it's an underground system. But the only way is to shrink the waste at the MBTA system. We just can't keep throwing money into it. You throw money in and money in and money in. What happens? It gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. You have to go after the waste and you got to start running it as a business.
Jason?
I have no doubt that there's some things that the MBTA could certainly do better. And there's always room for improvement in an organization that big and that complicated operations. That said, the real issues facing the MBTA are first, that they have the highest debt load of any public transit agency in the country. Much of that was not of their own making. It was as a result of the Big Dig and additional projects that they were required under lawsuits, settled lawsuits to take on, such as the Silver Line and the Green Line. And so they have a huge debt burden. And then second is that back in 2000, in order to have them run more efficiently, the legislature put in place forward funding so that they would be given a certain amount of revenue, and they'd have to run their operations to stay within that budget. Their revenue was pegged to 1 penny of the sales tax, but the assumptions about what the sales tax was going to do over the next 10 years were understated or overstated the reality, and so they've always fallen behind every year. We put in place a solution for this particular fiscal year to prevent these dire cuts to the bus service and the train service in our district, but we're absolutely going to have to put in place a more comprehensive solution next year.
John?
So I just want to say one thing, and it's not that the state isn't trying. They are trying. They're combining the Department of Transportation and everything. So they are taking a step in the right direction. It's just that we have to look more closely at the numbers and see where we can help them out.
Jason?
We, in fact, one of the pieces of reform legislation that I was involved with in my first term was a major overhaul of our transportation system, eliminating the Turnpike Authority, combining different transportation agencies under Mass DOT. That's been enormously successful in consolidating agencies, reducing some costs where there was overlap, improving management coordination. But none of that solves the fundamental problem of the debt load that the MBTA carries and the fact that their sales tax revenue that they rely on has not kept up with, with their costs. So we still need a more permanent solution.
Jason, we're going to start with you again on this. Give one example of an instance where you fully supported your political party's position, and then give an example where you have compromised to attain a bipartisan solution at the town or state level. And John, I'm not sure how we're going to ask you this question.
I'm really going about the politics, but I'll think of something.
Yeah. There have been, I'll try to think of some specific cases, but
Let's start with bipartisan. How do you view bipartisanship?
I focus, my approach to being in government is solving problems. And that's why I ran for office. That's why I'm interested in continuing to serve if I, continue to have the support of the voters in Stoneham and Winchester. It's because, we live in wonderful communities. I'm proud to live in Massachusetts, but we face challenges. We face challenges, our economic challenges, transportation. We've talked about healthcare, maintaining great schools, and those challenges need solutions. Now, I think there's some good ideas that Democrats have brought to the table. There are some good ideas that Republicans have brought to the table, and my approach has been to work with whoever brings good ideas. I mean, most of the legislation that we've been talking about today, whether it's healthcare reform, transportation restructuring, pension reform, budget management, all of that's been bipartisan. I mean, most, if not all, of the Republican minority caucus has supported that legislation that the Democratic-led state legislature, has provided leadership on.
John, your thoughts on bipartisanship?
Yeah, actually, I can speak as a selectman because we do have a mixed board, and we have worked well together on budgetary issues and any issue affecting the town. Party really doesn't matter. What's important is what's good for the community, and that's how we vote, and that's how we get things done. We just put a 5-year plan together with our tri-board for our budget, and it's working very nicely to the tune that the residents approved a debt exclusion for a middle school because the people saw this 5-year plan in effect. And that was done by you're not a party as a selectman, but we all have a party, and our board is mixed. At the time, actually, I believe it was 3-2. So I do this in my job. I reach across, I negotiate with owners of businesses, with employees, and you use whatever assets are available to you. Whatever assets you have, whether they're people, things, whatever, use all your assets. If it's a Republican idea, it's a good idea, you use it. It's a Democratic idea, and it's good for the people. Remember, we're here for the people.
Let's move on. Both Stoneham and Winchester include increasingly diverse populations by all measures. Give examples of your effort to reach out to and ensure the participation of all minorities. John, we're going to start with you, and I'm going to assume that minorities mean the diversification is by economic as well as racial and ethnic lines. So let's assume diversity in the widest proportion.
Well, that's a good question. Well, in our town, we make sure we actually start, if there's some economic issues, the selectmen were active with a food bank. We did things like this. Education-wise, we have the proper languages at the schools for the children to learn. I was actually, being an Italian-American, I actually donated money to keep Italian classes going, because we do have a pretty good-sized Italian population in our town. And we also offer, obviously, the other languages that are necessary, Spanish and French and Latin and those things. So we reach out to all our citizens, and we make sure everybody gets what they need, whether it's in the food area, education area, or whatever it is. And our Board of Selectmen has been very active in doing that.
Jason?
I think this is a really important issue. I think that it's very important that we embrace and welcome diversity in our communities. And I see diversity in all different types, whether it's socioeconomic, racial diversity, age diversity, seniors, young families, gender diversity, religious diversity. And I think that strengthens our communities, having that, bringing in, new ideas, new talents. I've tried very hard to make myself accessible to all different folks in the community. I'm very active at our senior centers and senior issues. I'm very present in our schools, and I have 2 kids, one of whom's here for the debate today, who are at the public schools in Winchester. I've visited a number of times the wonderful Chinese American Culture School, which is in Winchester, and it's one of the largest programs of its kind in the region. So that's something that I really value a lot, and I think brings a lot of richness to Stoneham and Winchester.
John, do you have anything to
I want to just add one thing. The thing I should have remembered first is my household. My household, now that I let the cat out of the bag, goes from 8 to 80. We have 4 generations in my household. I'm the oldest son, which leads to a lot of responsibility and leadership. And I was part of a committee. We just put it together, and I was representing the selectmen for the seniors, that they can now get an abatement on their taxes for providing office work at Town Hall, and they get up to $500 abatement on their taxes, and we just put in an outreach program for seniors that can't get out of their house. So I have the full spectrum in my household. 4 generations live there, and so I know what each particular group, what their wants and needs are.
Okay, the next is a question that's dear to my heart. Jason, we're going to start with you. What are some of your ideas to promote more affordable housing in our communities, Stoneham and Winchester?
Is that to me, Ann?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. And I know, given your role on the Housing Authority Board, you worked very hard on this issue and very knowledgeable on it. Both of our communities, this is a challenge for us. We are seeing, we've been talking about our seniors and trying to keep them in the community. We have situations where seniors, been here a long time, raised their children in the community, and now they, want to downsize into something smaller that's more affordable. They don't need the room, and it's difficult to find a lot of options. So some of the things that we have been doing, I think, in terms of in Winchester, the Selectmen's Fund that we've been building up to be able to support affordable housing initiatives. Stoneham's had some similar initiatives as well. There's also a terrific effort underway in Winchester to add a new group home for individuals with disabilities. That's something we should be supporting. So there's no silver bullet, because obviously we don't have a lot of empty space where we could be building, and it does need to fit within the character of the community. But I think all of these small initiatives that we can add, a unit here, a couple units there, a few more units there, is the way we will increase the housing stock.
John?
Yes, I feel also another group we have to remember that wants to move back to the community is our children when they graduate from high school and college. And we have to find ways to get housing for them also. And it's not an easy thing to do. It has to fit the structure of the community and the fabric of the community. And there's ways you can do it. Negotiation, leadership is most important. And there's no one way of doing it, but I always believe if people sit down and talk, you can always resolve an issue. People can always resolve an issue, and that's where leadership comes in. And it's important that we have the proper leadership to do this. And I am one of those leaders in Stoneham. There's no issue that I will not be a proponent for the people.
Just to point out to both of you that in both cases, the cost of housing in both Stoneham and in Winchester are very high. This is a real deterrent for affordable housing. What do you each, in terms of your rebuttal, any proposals in terms of how we can deal with this issue? Jason, we'll start with you.
It is a major challenge, as we've said. I think some of the programs that we have that allow, and taking advantage of some of the state programs also that we have that promote development where housing costs for a certain number of units are below market, so for younger families or for seniors. I think some of the things we can also do are, in the area of redevelopment, some of the things we're looking at right now in the Winchester Town Center, for example, and the kind of housing stock we could be encouraging there, or in some of the places within Stoneham that are being redeveloped in the future, like Fallon Road. Those are opportunities to add units that are at a more affordable price point.
John?
Yes, yeah, also the Old New England Memorial Hospital project, which I was on the Board of Selectmen when that site approval and everything went through, and we have so many units for affordable housing in that development also.
Okay. Here's a question that has national impact as well as local. What, if any, improvements do you see that need to be made to our Mass Health Care Reform Act? John?
Well, I don't know when you meant national. I don't know if you mean you're tying that into the
Healthcare
Act. But as a CPA, there's some things I like about the National Healthcare Act. I like the fact that children can stay on until they're 26. Pre-existing conditions are covered. But as a CPA and as a selectman, I have some concerns. Right now in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you employ 10 or more effective full-time employees and you don't provide health insurance, you get a tax. If you're an individual and you're 130% above the poverty level and you don't have health insurance, you get a tax. The same taxes are coming in with the federal program. And I'm wondering if our businesses and our residents are going to get double taxed for not having health insurance. That's something that's a concern of mine. And the main concern I have with the national one, and this is unknown, I will be attending seminars because it affects my business. But one thing that bothers me about the National Act is that the President and the Congress got a waiver from it. And if it is that good, why did they get a waiver? And why aren't they going to be covered by it?
Jason?
One of the things I believe very deeply is that every person in the Commonwealth should have access to affordable quality health care. And Massachusetts really has led the way forward for the whole country with the healthcare reform we passed in 2006, which has now resulted in over 98% of our adults having health insurance and virtually 100% of our children. So that means they have access to primary care and prevention and screenings and acute care should they need that. And that's a tremendous accomplishment. We just passed legislation. Do I have a minute here?
This is not a rebuttal.
I think this
No.
is my
This is
a
statement,
minute.
I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
If
Okay.
you have more, no, this is not rebuttal.
Thank you. Seemed like a very short amount of time. Thank you.
Start again.
What I wanted to say was that was we've made a lot of progress since 2006 in terms of healthcare, and that became the model for national healthcare reform, which I support. I think it's not perfect, but I think it's going to help move the whole country forward. What we recently passed in Massachusetts after a couple years of work, something that I was very involved in, is further reforms to our healthcare system, which will move us over time from what I would describe as a sick care system to what I would describe as a well care system, focusing much more on how do we keep people healthy, how do we focus on prevention and wellness, and ideally, where we can, keep people out of the hospital by keeping chronic disease rates down. So that's going to save money for families and businesses and government, and I think that's going to be a major step forward in the years ahead.
John?
I just want to add one thing, and to bring up the Winchester Hospital again, too. Whatever changes are made to the healthcare system, it must not impact the community hospitals. It would be a travesty if the Winchester Hospital got impacted because we made changes to healthcare that would affect the funding that they need through their patients and everything. So.
And Jason, do you have
Yes,
any?
and I agree it's very important, as we said earlier, to support our community hospitals. They provide much more affordable care and high quality care. The Winchester Hospital and our physicians groups and nurses, all of whom were very involved in the process of crafting this legislation that we just passed back in July. There were meetings and public forums and public hearings all over the state over a 2-year period that led to the legislation that most people are probably starting to learn more about. So I think it's, once again, Massachusetts is going to be leading the country in terms of how to have a healthcare system provides quality, affordable care for everybody.
Okay. Recently, the state legislature passed legislation to reform electronics benefit transfer. It's also called EBT. What is your position on EBT, which is used for food benefits, needy family and refugee benefits. And Jason, we'll start with you on that.
Okay.
I skipped a question.
There's actually two different programs here. One is more commonly known as food stamps,
Yes.
and those benefits are accessible to people in Massachusetts on a card, which is the EBT card. And there's, forget the exact number, but 600,000 or 700,000 Massachusetts residents that qualify, and that's under federal guidelines for qualification standards. So that tells you something about how many people have been struggling particularly in this economy that do qualify for food assistance. The other program is a program of very modest cash payments, and that's about $400 a month maximum, in many cases less, and it's only about 50,000 people who qualify for that, many of whom are disabled or they're single mothers with young children. And my view is we should do everything we can to make sure there's zero or as close to zero as possible fraud in the system, because any fraud in the system is taking money away from legitimate recipients. That's what we should be focused on, and the reforms that we ended up passing primarily did focus on ways to combat fraud and to make sure that there's as much integrity as possible in both of those two programs.
John, what do you think of EBT?
My view on EBT is it's a necessary mechanism for people that are hurting. It helps people pull themselves up and get started again. The problem I have with some of the way the program is run is sometimes, unfortunately, now there are some instances where people have hard decisions to make. Sometimes it's a matter of food or medicine. Both are necessities, and I understand those hard decisions. But also I have a great concern for children going to bed hungry at night because the program is not being used the way it's supposed to be used. You know, if somebody is out buying alcohol or things that aren't included, shouldn't be included in the food program, some young child may be going to bed hungry at night, and that's a travesty. That should not happen. This program should be used to help people get started again and be used to feed them and get them back on their feet.
Jason, other thoughts?
I agree with that, and there's a lot of misinformation that's been out there about these programs. The food stamp program for a long time already has put very strict limits around what those benefits can be used for, and it is for basic food supplies, groceries, produce, and so on, and so it does ensure that it's going to the right use. The issue of cash benefits and how to ensure how those are used, I think there's some reasonable conditions we can put around that, which the state has done, but we're limited logistically in just how much we can control people's spending decisions. I don't think we want to have a government that micromanages every spending decision that somebody has to make.
John, do you have any further thoughts?
Just make sure nobody goes to bed at night hungry.
Okay. And here we have a last question. What are your views on the current state sex education programs? What changes would you make to them, if anything? And John, we start with you.
Sex education?
Sex education?
State or schools?
State.
State education program. Well, the school committees, at least in Stoneham, determine the program for the children. So whatever they're teaching the children.
So what do you think of the Stoneham?
I think the teachers in that town do a good job. I really do.
Jason?
It's a good question to end on. I see
Yes.
my daughter smiling in the audience.
She's waiting to hear your answer, too.
What I have seen, certainly often through my daughters, is that the Winchester Public Schools, I think, do an excellent job in teaching health in general, in all aspects, whether it's sex education, nutrition, anti-tobacco, drug abuse, and so on. From what I've seen, the Stoneham Public Schools also do an excellent job, and that's critical to the development of our youth, so I totally commend our school systems for doing that. What I have seen, unfortunately, is that in some of our school districts, for a variety of reasons, very often it's due to, unfortunately, to budgetary reasons, they shortchange health programs. And that's unfortunate, because I think this type of education is very important for our youth to get. So actually one of the pieces of legislation I've sponsored at the state level would provide a set of standards and guidelines for comprehensive health education in all of our public schools. So that would include appropriate age-based sex education, but also nutrition, physical fitness, tobacco use, and so on. And we need to make sure that that's not just a mandate to our schools, that we do provide the funding through the Chapter 70 formula to do that. I think if we can make that happen, that would be very positive for the state.
Do you
Yeah,
have
just
any?
add one more thing, if
Sure.
I may. And I want to commend our school committee and our superintendent also. And I get back to, I believe it was the original question. We have to trim the size of the state government to get more money into Chapter 70 so that these programs can improve.
Jason? Your daughter's waiting to hear.
Yes, well, I just wanted to, I think we've covered that, but my opponent has said repeatedly, and it's very easy to say, trim the size of government, cut out waste. I think where the rubber meets the road is specifics, because everything you want to cut is somebody really cares about that. If you want to cut funding for schools, I don't think so. Do we want to cut funding for roads and bridges? I don't think so. Do we want to take money away from people who desperately need it with disabilities or health care? I don't think so. Do we want to cut funding for the Department of Environmental Protection and then slow down permitting for our businesses? I don't think so. So it's easier said than done, and I think you have to take a hard look at how to run the government as efficiently as possible, and I've been very involved in that. But I think it's disingenuous to say we're going to find all this money to fund all these important needs by just cutting the size of government.
We're through. Now to the closing statements. John, you're going to start, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Once again, I would like to thank the Winchester League of Women Voters for holding tonight's event. As seen by my hands-on involvement, my passion is for you, the people. Take a look at my leadership skills. Keeping the DCR pool open for all kids and families that would have closed on the incumbent's watch. Managing the hockey rink to now making a profit. I have the ability to think outside the box. Look what we did in Stoneham. Squeezing the MWRA for pilot money. Getting $100,000 for billboard permission. Balancing Stoneham's budget when we get less and less state aid and just keeping things going. And most recently, I didn't take no for an answer for the GIC. They made a ruling that I thought was contrary to state law. And through many calls and researching the law, we got them to change their ruling, and it's now saving the town of Stoneham. The total cost that might have been for the town of Stoneham is over $100,000 a year. And through my leadership and persistence, we're able to get that ruling overturned. So in closing, I just want to say, please vote for me on Thursday, September 6th. Remember, I support the ticket. And if the incumbent is successful in the upcoming election, I will be knocking on doors the very next day for him, and I know he will do the same for me. I can be reached at electrondepinto.com. Thank you.
Jason?
Well, thank you, Ann, and thank you to the League, and thank you to John for a spirited debate today that I think has focused on many important issues that are facing our communities. Despite the challenges of the past few years, I'm proud of what we have been able to accomplish working together, investing in our communities and local economic development, preserving education funding and building new schools, mitigating flood problems, and moving forward with major improvements to public transportation. If I have the privilege of being re-elected this fall, I will continue to focus on 4 top priorities. First, local economic development projects that strengthen and enhance our communities. Second, education funding reform to ensure adequate and equitable funding for all of our public schools. Third, continuing to work to contain healthcare costs to make care more affordable for our families, businesses, small businesses, and seniors. And lastly, government reforms that continue to make our state government as efficient, accountable, and as responsive as possible to our needs and concerns. I believe we have great opportunities to strengthen our communities and move Massachusetts forward. I ask for your vote on September 6th. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of this forum, and thank you, John and Jason, for a good discussion.
Madam Moderator, thank you.
And also for being a candidate. It's not an easy task, and it's not for the faint of heart. After September 6th primary election, one of you will be the Democratic Party's nominee for the 31st Middlesex District State Representative. Good luck. Thanks also to WinCam for taping the forum live, which will be broadcast several times by WinCam on Comcast channels 8, 9, and 22, on Verizon channels 36, 37, and 38, and on Stoneham Government TV channel before the September 6th election. For all of you who are watching who are registered voters in Winchester and Stoneham, please go out to the polls on Thursday, September 6th, and vote. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. One of the goals of the Winchester League of Women Voters is to encourage all eligible voters to vote. The League of Women Voters is planning another candidates forum before the November 6th election. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a nice banner you put up, too. In the square.